You're listening to the Lawyer Lifestyle Podcast with Chicago attorney Dave Scriven-Young. This podcast is brought to you by Anchor, which is the app that I use to record and edit the Lawyer Lifestyle Podcast. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast, so let me explain. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so that it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more platforms. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. And it's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 216 of the Lawyer Lifestyle Podcast for June 2nd, 2020. My name is Dave Scriven-Young, an attorney from Chicago, Illinois, and I'll be your host. This podcast takes you on a daily journey to discover key principles in the areas of marketing, sales, and leadership for attorneys. So we're continuing on with the communication discussion, and it's really an interesting time to think about communication with everything going on. You have protesters who want to communicate. You have government leaders who want to communicate their message. And so it's really interesting to see the difference between a directing strategy for communication as opposed to a connecting strategy for communication. Yesterday we talked about why we need to give as lawyers, to give first, give continually. And now we're going to talk about listening, to open the best door to communicating with people. And this comes from Dr. John C. Maxwell's book, Leadershift. And what he says is, if you don't listen, you can't connect with people. Because if you don't listen, people will actually stop talking to you and you'll become isolated. If you do listen, not only will they tell you things you need to know, but they'll also connect with you because they see that you care and that you value what they have to say. Excuse me. So I just actually finished watching a group of demonstrators, and I live in Naperville, so I was particularly interested in this. They were in downtown Naperville, and they marched to the Naperville Police Department. And what ended up happening was the mayor actually walked with the protesters to the police station. And the first thing that happened when they got to the police station, and there was some chanting, there was a lot of things going on. And I think the mayor really felt like he needed to get hold of the situation. And so, it was clear that they have a lot prepared, and the whole downtown area was prepared in terms of, things are and have been being boarded up because, who knows if we're going to have looting in the downtown Naperville area. But then it was clear that they had some sort of communication strategy where the mayor talked to the entire group. They also apparently had several Naperville city employees who were African American talk to the crowd. And what was interesting is sort of some of the back and forth between the protesters and the mayor, where clearly the protesters wanted to give the mayor a piece of their mind in terms of some of the discrimination they faced. And it was interesting because the mayor listened, but then he also took it upon himself to, cut them off a little bit and, give them sort of what he wanted to talk about. So it's clear that he has, a lot of things on his mind, including, threats of violence. So, he was doing his best to tamper back sort of the rhetoric that was being spewed by the protesters. We also saw, several of the Illinois State Police that were there, and I believe some of the Naperville police, as well as the mayor, actually take a knee, if you will, and showed support with the protesters for their issues, including the the death of George Floyd. So it was a fascinating look at communication, and specifically about listening, because I think the best thing that we all can do at this point is listen to the concerns of African Americans, of those of color who, want to tell us that, what's going on in our society is wrong and that things need to change. So just wanted to run through this list of things that Dr. Maxwell talks about in terms of listening, and again, how we can apply it to our current situation. So he says that there are a number of things that we can do to listen better, and the first thing to do is, he talks about making a list of the negatives of not listening well, and those would be things such as, few people had anything to share with me, my leadership was based on assumption, my ideas were only the only ideas that were being implemented, no one was taking ownership of tasks except for me, and my team lacked connection. So clearly, not listening makes people not be connected to you, because look, you are basically telling them, this is my point of view, this is the way it should be done, and I don't care, what you have to say, or your opinion. And why would somebody whose opinion, or if you feel like your opinion doesn't matter to your leader, you're not going to speak up, you're not going to tell them what's going on. The next thing is that Dr. Maxwell reminds himself daily to listen well. So when he goes into meetings, he actually takes out a legal pad to take notes, and he writes a big letter L on the top of the page. And that L, of course, stands for listen, and it's his reminder to listen as he engages in this meeting. He also says that he stops interrupting people, because when you interrupt people, you obviously are more focused on what you want to communicate rather than trying to listen to what the other person has to say. And what you're really saying is that what you have to say is more important than what the other person has to say. Dr. Maxwell also says that he started asking questions. So he stopped interrupting people, and he also asked, basically asking questions invites others to talk. And that's the best way to understand somebody, is by listening to them. And then finally, he invited people to hold them accountable for listening. So he wanted others on his team to let him know when they felt like that he was not listening to them. And so, again, sort of, applying it to sort of the current situation, I think, there are a lot of things, especially, me as a white person, don't understand. I don't understand a lot of what's happening. I mean, at a obvious level, I completely understand why people would react angrily to the death of the gentleman, George Floyd, by the police, and to rampant discrimination. I get all that. I don't get the violence. I don't get a lot of other things. But I don't think it's for me on this podcast or in general to insert my opinion as to, what African Americans should be feeling, what African Americans should be saying or doing. I think what we all need to do is sit back and, yes, protect property, protect the safety of people. We absolutely should be doing that, but we also should be listening a lot. And there are lots of ways to do that. Obviously, if you're listening to this podcast, you listen to podcasts. One of the great things that I saw today as a suggestion was, and I've actually seen several examples of this, is to actually give out suggestions of, African American authors, or Netflix movies, or books that you should read in order to think more clearly about these issues and to understand better about these issues. Even if you don't live in an African American community, certainly you can become if not fluent, but certainly you can have a better understanding of these issues. So I certainly recommend any of those articles with those resources. And if you listen to podcasts, obviously you do. Search out some African American podcasts just to understand what's going on, understand better what's happening, because the only way that we're going to be able to connect with people, whether that's as an attorneys or as just real people, walking down the street, coming into, going into stores, going into neighborhoods, going into your neighbors' houses. You want to connect with them, and you have to do that, you have to understand them and come to some common ground. So for your daily action item today, I want you to think about specifically how you're going to better listen and understand and come to a common understanding with the people that you communicate with on a daily basis, whether that's your family, whether that's your clients, whether that's people at your law firm. And what are you going to do specifically to stop yourself from, cutting people off and do a better job listening? And then choose one resource, whether that's a Netflix movie or a podcast or African American radio station, what have you, that's going to help you to better understand what's going on in this world and why people are having the reaction that they're having. So I do invite you to join into the discussion. You can leave me a voicemail by going to anchor.fm/attorneydsy, and you can hit that message button. You can leave me a comment for me to play on the show or a question for me to answer. You can also leave me a comment or question on social media. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at AttorneyDSY. I'm also on LinkedIn. Let me know if you have any comments about this episode. Tell me what you think about this podcast, or give me a topic you'd like to hear about. This podcast is on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, TuneIn, and Anchor, so please be sure to subscribe and rate and review. I also want to invite you to the next session of the Lawyer's Emotional Intelligence Book Club, continuing with Dr. Chatterjee's book, The Stress Solution. The next session will be Thursday, June 4th at 8:30 Central. That is a time and date change. Usually we do it on Wednesdays at 7 o'clock. This week we're going to do it on Thursday at 8:30 p.m. Central. You can find out more at facebook.com/lawyerseq. Have a great day or night, and remember to fight for the lifestyle that you want and become the rainmaker that you need to be.